contain radiation if anything goes wrong. Most Soviet nuclear power plants do not have such containment structures. Are they necessary? This is what can happen, and apparently has happened in Russia, as described by correspondent Marshall Frady in an ABC News close-up last summer.
The worst that can happen involves a loss of cooling water around the fuel rods. Even if the plant operation is immediately shut down, the uncovered fuel rods would reach an extraordinary heat, soon melting themselves right through the reactor vessel, the beginning of a total meltdown. Ultra-hot radioactive material would drop to the floor of the chamber, burn through deep into the earth, possibly releasing enormous amounts of radiation. Radiation from any source can attack the thyroid, the skin, the lungs, the spleen, the liver, the kidneys, the bone, the muscle, the reproductive organs. Its effects, cancers, genetic mutations.
Very little radiation has been detected in Finland, Sweden, Denmark. It's a lot more than normal and alarming, but still not harmful to humans. However, close to the Soviet plant, it must be another story. The chief nuclear scientist for the Electric Power Research Institute in Palo Alto, California said tonight, if the radioactivity is a few millirems 700 miles away, I'd hate to be within 10 miles of the site. What about the people who live near that plant? Chances are, whatever they know, it's by word of mouth only. Indeed, it is Budapest Radio in Hungary, which tonight reports injuries in Russia and says that the radiation leak occurred next to a reservoir which serves the large Soviet city of Kiev.
They have not had the heavy regulation, the media pressure, the legal pressures that our nuclear industry has faced. Add all that up, and you have to ask yourself, can they be watching safety as closely as our industry has been forced to, or is it normal human instinct to cut corners?
The Soviets might well have said nothing about this accident had not the wind blown the fallout over their neighbors in Scandinavia. Did some of the radioactivity go also to East Bloc nations? It is difficult to imagine a southeasterly wind from Kiev near the accident drifting toward Denmark and not touching Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, perhaps Hungary, countries that are several hundred miles closer to the trouble than Scandinavia. But there's very little official word from any of those nations. For the moment, it may be safe to say that Western Europeans, Americans, and the world in general have a better sense of all this than the Russian public. Jed Duval for Nightline.
Later on, we'll be talking with two experts on nuclear power. But first, when we return, the impact on the Soviet Union. We'll be joined by Soviet affairs expert Dmitry Simes of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and by Marshall Goldman of the Russian Research Center at Harvard University, who has written books on Soviet energy and pollution problems. Joining us live now in our Washington Bureau is Dmitry Simes, Senior Associate with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and an expert on the Soviet Union. And Marshall Goldman, Professor of Economics at Wellesley College and Associate Director of Harvard University's Russian Research Center. Gentlemen, we are going to have to infer from your knowledge, to a large extent, what has happened there this evening. And Professor Goldman, I wonder if you would help me just in terms of geography. We have a map, in fact, that you brought in. We've done a little bit of colorizing to that map, but let's take a look at it. There at the bottom we see Kiev. Up in at the top of your screen, you can see the little nuclear symbol. That is the location of the nuclear plant. And what, Professor Goldman, is that body of water?
Well, my assumption is that it's the reservoir for the water supply of Kiev. This is the way the Russians usually do things. They upstream of the major city, as in Moscow, they will use the water supply, they'll dam it up, and it's possible, therefore, that this reservoir has been contaminated because it's really an enlarged Dnieper River joined by the Pripyat River, and that's where the nuclear facility is located. And so it's possible that it's not just the other cities up north where the air cloud is moving, but also the water supply of Kiev that's been affected.
Now, if it is, and we've been told that it is, roughly 60 miles from Kiev to the nuclear plant, then it would be, what, 5, 10, 15 miles from the plant to that water supply?
Or the likelihood is the plant is located right on the river, And so it's a question that could be 5 miles, it could be less. And it's partly speculation, but my assumption is that it's very good speculation.
Now, tell me a little something about the Soviet dependence on nuclear energy. How dependent have they become over the years?
Well, it now constitutes about 8 to 9% of their total electric supply. Their goal is to make it much more because their energy supplies, coal, oil, have been depleted in the western part of the country, and so they've instituted a regulation basically which says that any new electric utility built in the western part of the Soviet Union will be nuclear energy. And they build them in large clusters. There are actually 4 reactors operating at this particular facility. The first one was built in 77. And the earlier ones did not have a containment vessel, as your reporter indicated earlier. So they count on this, and this is really going to put a crimp in their efforts to bring about more nuclear energy.
Mr. Symes, what can you tell us? We have kind of jumped to certain conclusions about Mr. Gorbachev and about the Soviet Union under Gorbachev. Is it likely that we are going to learn any more of what has happened? In other words, more than they have to tell us?
First of all, they obviously will have to tell something. When they announce major disasters in the Soviet Union on evening news, on national TV, they always will tell, as they told us tonight, that there would be National Commission of Inquiry and they would publicly report findings of this commission. But they would tell very little about casualties, they would tell very little about real reasons for the disaster. They would provide a very brief summary, and usually the summary would be rather misleading.
Now, Kiev is a city of more than 2 million people. Somehow, even in the Soviet Union, something is going to get out, isn't it?
Ted, there will be many rumors, and there will be so many rumors, so much different gossip, that will be very difficult to determine what has really happened. But I think you asked a very good question. Here we have a new Soviet leader who was so much praised for openness, and they made this announcement only when they absolutely had to, when the Scandinavians detected this reaction. Their instinct was to wait as much as possible and not to reveal the truth to their own population. I think this is a rather revealing and sad story.
All right, gentlemen, let's take a look now at another map that we have, a somewhat broader map, and if you would just look at your monitors, you will see there again is that nuclear symbol just at 11 o'clock above Kiev, and then over there to the left, Poland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and up to Finland. Does it seem reasonable to assume that that nuclear cloud, that radioactive cloud, made its way across Eastern Europe? And if so, are we likely to hear anything more, Marshal Goldman, from Eastern Europe than we're hearing from the Soviet Union?
I think we're going to hear a lot more from Eastern Europe because they've been very much concerned about these things. We're also going to hear from some of the other major cities inside the Soviet Union, Minsk, the Estonian Republic, the Latvian Republic. There are some very major cities in that area. And, you know, just like in the United States when we had 3 Mile Island, Jim McKenzie said earlier that it didn't compare at all in its magnitude to what's happened recently in the Soviet Union. And I think the Soviets are going to be very frightened about it as a result. They've been very cavalier about energy in the past and how they've treated their safety precautions, and now it's going to come down on them.
All right, gentlemen, we want to hear from some of our scientific experts who are with us, and when we come back, we will focus on the potential effects of the accident with Dr. James McKenzie, in charge of nuclear power research for the Union of Concerned Scientists, and with Dr. Marvin Dickerson of Lawrence Livermore Laboratories, who is tracking nuclear fallout from the accident. With us now live in our Washington Bureau, Dr. James McKenzie, a nuclear physicist who was formerly with the President's Council on Environmental Quality and is now a senior staff scientist for the Union of Concerned Scientists, a public interest research organization. And Dr. Marvin Dickerson, who joins us live from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, one of 2 nuclear weapons plants in the United States. Dr. Dickerson is project director of a group that tracks radioactivity in the atmosphere and is closely monitoring conditions in and around the Soviet Union. What so far? Anything?
Well, at the moment, we have been collecting the weather data, the weather pattern data, for that part of the world over the past 4 to 5 days. And that's where we've been concentrating our efforts thus far, so that we can begin to build a case on the transport of the material out of the Soviet Union and into the Scandinavian area.
How important is that weather data to you? And more importantly, how important is it to us here in the United States? In other words, do you share the point made by that man from the EPA down in Montgomery, Alabama, that theoretically this could wend its way?
Pardon me, miss. I like what you came up with, Double D.
One could say things are looking up, Eddie.
Look at me, guys! Am I up? Oh, I am okay.
Welcome to Camp Rock!
Camp Rock 3?
I guess the
God.
song's kind of catchy.
This is Eric.
Stupid
When
and
he
stupid.
got injured in a car accident, he called Morgan & Morgan.